So yeah, I live in the community here in Sheffield with four friends at the moment, four Sangha members, and I've also got 3 children and 5 grandchildren. So that, just to give you an idea of what my practice might have been over the past 10 weeks, it's been working with the sense of loss and disconnection from my family, and feeling like I'm on a very, very intense retreat here for the past 10 weeks. My most recent granddaughter was born with a broken arm from a difficult delivery, so that was all very difficult and very painful. So I've had a million opportunities to practice in various ways. I'm very grateful for all of those opportunities to practice the Dharma. And could have chosen a million different things, but what I've decided to go with was a strong central practice of mine has been learning the Dharma by heart. And so this is going to be 10 reasons why I found it beneficial to learn chunks of Dharma by heart. So number 1, it takes your mind somewhere trustworthy, somewhere dependable in moments of overwhelm or confusion. It's like an injection of sanity, an injection of truth into my body, into my mind. Number 2, it's familiar. It's calming and rhythmic. Number 3, the original disciples of the Buddha only had the Dharma in their minds and bodies. They had no other way of learning, no other way of practicing except to learn the Dharma by heart. And I always wonder, that when we see in the suttas people getting enlightened left, right and centre, I wonder if it has something to do with that, that they were walking around with the Dharma going round and round and round in their minds and in their bodies all the time, because they had to learn it like that. And I sometimes wonder, is that one of the reasons? So I think that the words of the Dharma, the shape and the sound of the Dharma, the suttas, have a particular energy and a vibration which I think has a profound effect on the body. It feels really good for the words to be, for me to say them out loud and to say them in my mind. It feels really good, like something goes clunk in me. And then I think, oh my God, these are the words of an enlightened mind. If the one I'm learning at the moment, which is the sutta about the worldly winds, the Buddha taught this. And it's from the Buddha's mind into my mind. And when I think about that, that adds another layer of, all my witterings, all my stories, all my witterings just kind of fade away. There's number 5, there's nowhere for my stories to hook onto when my mind is full of the Dharma. There's nowhere for them to go. You can't do both. You can't tell a story about how terrible somebody is when you've got your mind on this loop. Number 6, it's very good for the brain to learn things. And I'm 60 next year, so I'm really conscious of wanting my brain to work well and to continue to work well and to get even better as I get older. And this is the kind of thing that I think is really useful. So the number 7, the mind is full of beauty with the Dharma in it. And it's a little bit like nature, being in nature. It's a bit like that, I find. That when I've got these words in my mind, like the one I'm learning at the moment is these 8 conditions spin after the world, and the world spins after these 8 worldly conditions. And I just go, oh, it's just gorgeous, gorgeous. Number 8, it can't be taken away from you. When it's in your mind and you know it by heart, it can't be taken away from me. I might be, in Asda, or like I was today, or I might be going shopping in somewhere, and I don't need a book with me. I've got it with me all the time. And who knows where we'll be in the future. The internet might just go. We might not have the internet. We might not have books available to us. We don't know what the future holds. But if it's in my body and in my mind, then I'll always have the Dharma, I'll always have the Buddha with me in here. You always have the Dharma at your fingertips. at your fingertips, and it comes to you at those moments of crisis and those moments when you really need something true and dependable, those moments when you've really got to have something meaningful to help you through. It's like an antidote to everything, an antidote to any negative mental state. And these words, they pop in when you need them. So that's my 10 reasons why learning the Dharma by heart has helped me through this lockdown.
Okay, very good, very inspiring. Thanks, Sanghagita. Yes, so I'm going to be talking as well about my practice in this sort of ever-changing context, really, of the current crisis. And of course, most recently, we've had the Black Lives Matters phenomena, really, that's hit the world as well. But I'll say a bit about my life. I have 3 grown-up children who are all back in Sheffield, something I never thought would happen again, and it's wonderful, although my food bill has skyrocketed since they've arrived back. I'm a researcher and manager at the University of Sheffield. Mainly, in the last 3 months, it's really been my activity as a manager, as a head of department, which has been really dominant, been a big part of my life, sorting out things like the logistics of working from home, then the impact on staff of doing that, and the impact on their lives. And most recently, there's a huge financial crisis which is hitting the sector at the moment. Now, while I'm not at all a frontline worker, my job is quite exhausting, demanding, and at times stressful. And it certainly impacts on sleep, energy, mood sometimes, all sort of perfectly human responses, really. And like many people, I've also missed close contact with key friends and family, including my dad, who's living alone down in Eastbourne, who I usually regularly see and haven't really been able to. So in terms of my response, I think one thing I have learned is just how dependent in many ways I am on conditions. I mean, I'd like to think perhaps that I'm more resilient, but something I've learned is that it's important to recognise, in a sense, where you are, not accept necessarily where you are, but recognise it, because in a sense that's where you can develop from. Of course, this may involve changing conditions, but as well as changing the way you see things, which has been a common theme, I think, in what many people have been saying. But I think one of the key things for me, really, in all this has been just in very, very visible ways, being able to understand better just simple interdependence, the way we depend on all those people around us, including obviously NHS care workers and so on, but also posties, bin collectors, delivery people. I even saw my window cleaner the other day for the first time in ages, and we both smiled at one another. That dependency is something which I really come to value and acknowledge, and obviously be grateful for. I think the other thing I found useful in all this is, because of the sheer range of people's experiences, is using the local news a bit, since I find that a really helpful way of connecting with people's lives, and also seeing how people have responded in all this. And some of it is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. I have to say local news is rather more inspiring in a way than often the national news, which seems to involve rather unedifying cross-examinations of politicians for long periods of time. The other thing that came through to me, I think it was a few weeks ago, is Ian, the GP, who said metta is the best medicine, and that really sort of rang true with me. And of course, a part of this, of course, is metta to yourself. I think many of us at certain times have been struggling, and bringing metta, kindness to yourself, is absolutely crucial, really, since being more integrated and positive is not only good for you, of course, it's also good for those around you. Of course, we may sometimes try and seek that in chocolate, a bottle of wine, and a Game of Thrones box set, but that's unlikely to bring about much sort of improvement in any sort of duration, and is not going to provide much depth or meaning. But so more, I suppose, looking to find ways of providing more space in my life has been really important. I've started working 4-day weeks and using up my leave that I would otherwise use to go away perhaps, but taking a day off each week, which gives me more time. Obviously, I've kept going with my meditation practice, and of course, remembering very crucially stage 1 of the Metta Bhavana, though of course, self-metta doesn't have to be stage 1. Pujas. Pujas is something which I've always really valued in devotional practice, and puja for me is very much a social event. It's something you do with others, you share it with others. And so I've had to sort of learn, in a sense, to adapt to this. While we've had Buddha Day, which is fantastic, much of what I've had to rely on really is starting to integrate more puja into my day-to-day life. Refugees and precepts in the morning, a very simple, short ritual in the evening, chanting, that sort of thing, which I've found really helpful in providing meaning and motivation for my commitment to the 3 jewels. And of course, last but not least, the Sangha, which is something True Atma is tremendous at. Everything from the sort of the Zoom parties at the start of Tuesday nights, which, like every good introvert, I want to hide in the corner, but is rather more difficult now. Our Mitra group, which is composed of all men who've asked for ordination, led by Vidanya, tremendous group, a real anchor, I think, for me, providing great opportunities to share our lives and study together and so on. And the other thing, perhaps, which I haven't done so much in the past, is come to really value buddying up with people, regularly being in contact with people who fellow Buddhists, talking about our lives together. And that's something which has given me tremendous support over this period. I just wanted to finish really on a part of the sort of 4 reminders, which is not particularly original, but it's very inspiring in its evocation of impermanence, insubstantiality, but it has tremendous beauty. So I just thought I'd end with this, because it's something which I find always worth reflecting on in any moment, really. So this life I must know as a tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. Hello, lovely friends. Okay. So I'll just start by saying a bit about my situation. So I work as an optometrist, and I've been furloughed for the past 11 weeks, although I actually just went back to work today for the first time. And yeah, my initial experience of lockdown was veering between 2 extremes. So at first it was, oh, well, what an opportunity for practice. You know, I could really make the most of this time, this unprecedented amount of time I've been given off of work, which is fair and true. But what that ended up leading to was going into a lot of comparing with others and the sort of beating yourself with a stick behaviour. So, well, I should be meditating 7 times a day and blah, 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 you know. So it very much spiralled into really unhelpful pressure, actually. So that was one edge I was veering into. And then I would bounce into the other edge, which was, oh, well, actually, it's enough just to get through this time and just to be. That's fine. And that's also true. But that would veer into lethargy, basically. And so at first, for me, my practice was just getting the middle way between these 2 extremes. And once I found that middle way, things could really start to open up, basically. And I started to find a lot of peace and spaciousness and joy in the weeks that followed. So I thought I'd talk about 3 areas: mind, magic, and meaning. So mind, first of all. I realise more and more, I'm quite very extroverted, and I find it really helpful to be in situations or do things that reflect my state of mind back at me. And a new one I have found in lockdown is gardening, because I seem to have become a bit of a gardener lately, as I'm sure many of us have. And what I found is there are days where I can go out in the garden and find it frustrating and hopeless and pointless and awful, and and just see, and then I can just see how murky my mind is and what my actual state is. And then seeing that reflected back at me, I can do something with it. So I can look for connection with friendship and metta practice. Because other days I can go out in the garden and just find a lot of play with it, actually, because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can just try things out, experiment. And what I found is I can give a lot of time and care and effort and actually not be tied to it even paying off or working or having any results from it, because just the process is enjoyable. And that shows me when my mental states are really spacious and supple and really open to things. So that's something I found really helpful in terms of looking at my state of mind. And then magic. So something I've been doing in this time is learning the names of trees. And I've had a lot of wonderful support from friends with this, actually, who are very learned in this area. And what I found is the more I've done this and gone out on walks, is this increasing connection with nature, with trees and with the landscape. Because before I would go on a walk and I would just think, well, I would just see trees. Oh, that's nice. Those are some nice trees. And now I go out and I can see the individual character of the different trees, and I'm looking at the leaves and the shapes and the colours. And I'm just seeing more and more and more. And it's just really opening something up. And I went on a walk recently with Jordana in Rivlin, and she pointed out hawthorn to me. So she was teaching me about hawthorn. And I was really trying to drink in the detail and think, right, this is what hawthorn looks like. And then she pointed out the little thorns, and I'd just been looking at them consistently, and suddenly it was like a veil had been taken off. Because yeah, there's little thorns everywhere. I'm sure that's what gives it its name. And I just thought, how much of my life is there just veils over because I just don't look enough? It's like I'm not initiated into these different areas. And there's just all this obscuration on my different senses. And just having this experience of it coming off and just seeing more, it just got me really excited about, well, what reality actually could be like and how mind-blowing that is. Like the more and more veils get lifted off and the more and more we see how things really are. I just found that very exciting. And then the last area I want to talk about, meaning. So going into lockdown, I realised that I was losing my very easy, tangible sense of meaning, which is through work, because I help people through my job, and it provides a very easy sense of meaning in the world. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have to delve deeper. That's really important. So another set of reflections I've been looking at is meaning, and well, what is the meaning in my life actually? Because of course, getting it through work is so conditional, and yeah, I'm not allowed to, well, I haven't been allowed to work, so where else will it come from? So I found it really enjoyable looking into that. And what I found was what I would describe as quite, first of all, an outward sense of meaning, which for me is living a beautiful life, which is to do with friendship and joy and play and connection with people. But it's also develop the trees, developing the sense of awareness of the world, so more and more seeing things clearly. And it's ethics, it's living this beautiful life ethically, because like Shanti Deva says, what I really want is to perfume my mind more and more. And then I found that there's underneath that, again, there's a much more inward sense of meaning, and this is shifting towards like in the direction of the unconditioned, so meaning that comes from sort of almost like a secret mythical realm. And what I found is, like, over these 11 weeks, as the time's opened up more and more, and I've had all this time and space to be with myself, more than I've ever had in my whole life, really. My dream life has started to become really potent, and it's like my practice is permeating into my dreams now. And it's really interesting just seeing this sort of mysterious sense of meaning just coming out in these different ways. And it's really interesting now. I've gone back to work today, and it was hard work, but it was good. But I realised, like, oh yeah, I do have a different relationship to this now. It's like my actual sense of meaning is coming from a different place. And I've just found that really interesting. So I just wanted to share that with you. So thank you.
So thank you, Sanghagita and John and Pretti, for those really interesting snapshots from your lives. And this is a bit odd because I seem to be talking to myself, which is funny because I spent rather a lot of time doing that over the last 11 weeks during lockdown because I live alone. And like Pretti, I've not been engaging with my job as a teacher in the same way, not spending very much time at school, which has sort of taken that structure and meaning out of my life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience of that, spending large periods of time on my own during lockdown. So yeah, it's really been an opportunity to look at my experience of my mind and my mental states much more closely. And as Dharma practitioners, that's what we're in the business of doing, to try to know our minds better and more clearly. And in particular, over this period of living on my own, I've become much better acquainted with solitude and boredom. So I'm going to talk about those two things. So firstly, just talk about solitude. And solitude is something that was really praised by the Buddha. So he really encouraged his followers to seek periods of solitude out. And he spoke of two different aspects of solitude in its truest sense. So the first one is physical solitude, so just being alone by oneself, and ideally seeking this out, although I know for many people, myself included, that physical solitude is something that has been thrust upon us rather than chosen, and it's been a big part of my experience. But the other aspect of solitude is what we could describe as kind of mental and emotional solitude. So this kind of sense of the heart and the mind being withdrawn in some sense from worldly concerns, or at least kind of not tangled up in worldly concerns in the way that they usually are. Could say a sense of being self-contained. And I've definitely found this sort of solitude quite a bit harder to come by during this period. So quite some time ago, I came across a definition of solitude that I found very helpful. I can't remember where it came from now, which is that real solitude is being alone with no input from other minds, So no things like TV, books, music, conversations, anything that is generated through the minds of others. And I've really seen how, despite spending so much time on my own, I find it really difficult to switch off from these things, from this constant kind of stream of content from the minds of others. And I've just seen how I crave and seek this out almost kind of compulsively, I suppose. Yeah, and what I've sort of spotted is that this kind of seeking out of this sort of input from others can really kind of stop me from experiencing solitude and the benefits of solitude in its fullest sense. When I experience myself really reaching out for these things, I get more of a sense of just aloneness, which can really kind of quickly, if not guarded against, turn into loneliness, which is a much more kind of unpleasant state to experience. So that's been a big part of my practice over the last couple of months, just trying to spend more and more time experiencing true solitude rather than just aloneness. So yeah, a little bit about what this has been like. Well, for a big part, it's been quite boring. I've experienced a lot of boredom, but that's been interesting in itself. It's given me an opportunity to really kind of investigate what boredom is, what the mind experiences when boredom is happening. And I've sort of come to see how boredom is really underpinned by this craving for experience and sensory input, and also a dissatisfaction with current experience. So boredom isn't just, in my experience, sort of not having something to do, but rather this kind of craving of occupation, and also being unable to settle down or be contented with what I'm doing. And this has been something I've been really having to work with. So I've also been watching how in this sort of state of boredom, it can really create the conditions for prapancha to arise, for compulsive thinking to arise. So I've been finding myself getting sucked into slightly compulsive thinking, around the big things in life, the big questions like, would I be happier in this situation if I was living with other people, or if I was living with somewhere else, or if I had a partner, or if I lived near my family. And I've really just found that thinking about these big questions has just driven a lot of dukkha, a lot of suffering. So instead, I've been trying to practice when experiencing this sort of prapancha, this craving and aversion, to just try to bring awareness to my experience as it is, my experience in my body, in my mind, and trying to let go of these cravings and these aversions through the power of awareness. So paying attention to experience can allow a very, very spacious contentedness to arise and for these difficult feelings to dissipate. So it's been really useful to see in a way what is on the other side of boredom, which is available to all of us if we're willing to sit with the discomfort, to be patient and to not always reach out for distraction from input from the minds of others. So yeah, just to finish, this period in lockdown has really just re-highlighted to me the way in which how I use my mind conditions how contented and happy I feel. And yeah, the big decisions of life and thinking over the big decisions of life, whilst not trivial, are just nowhere near as important in my experience when it comes to my own happiness compared to the quality of awareness that I'm able to bring to the kind of small moments of my daily life. And we can all practice with this, with bringing that quality of attention to our moment-to-moment lives, whether we're alone or whether we're with others. So that is my encouragement to you, whatever your situation is, to try to experience some solitude, some boredom, and see if you can discover what is on the other side of that. Thank you.
Brilliant.